tonight for whatever reason he wants to. So good questions and things like that. And those are good for the prizes over at registration.
Don't forget to follow CircleCityCon for news and announcements. There's also Schemaverse and CTF going on the room two rooms over. And you can play to win a ticket to DEF CON. They won't take care of your flight, but you will get a ticket for DEF CON, and you'll be able to compete in Schemaverse against other people that have won previously. And
next is going to be Matt Kelly, who's probably best known for his charity work. He teaches underprivileged children how to mine Bitcoin by hand. And
actually, Dogecoin.
Dogecoin by hand. And,
much Doge.
And take it, man.
All right. Good deal. How are you guys doing? So, proactive defense, eliminating low-hanging fruit. About me, my name is Matt Kelly. I'm on Twitter. I tweet sometimes. I work with EY, Ernst & Young, in the Advanced Security Center. I do attack and pen work. So I focus on internal, external red teaming, web application, etc. I used to work at Crow Horwath, which I definitely want to mention. Some great people over there, and I developed this talk while working with them. I recently moved to Houston, Texas. So if any of you guys live in Houston, hit me up, because I don't know anybody down there. I'm from Chicago originally. And yeah, quick show of hands. How many of you guys are on blue teams in here or work defense? Okay, how about red teams? A few? Okay. So quick disclaimer, I represent my own opinion. I hate that statement, but I work for a really big company, and I don't presume to speak for them. And then also, there's probably not a lot new in this talk. So if you're looking for a new zero-day or look APT protection, actually I do cover that in Drink. But yeah, we're facing a world where we're still dealing with the same problems over and over again. People keep complaining about SQL injection and how to fix that. Reality is, we still haven't fixed firewalls. You know, that's been around for 30 years. We still haven't learned how to firewall. So we're going over old stuff here, but it's stuff that no one does well. So inspiration, I mentioned I do pen tests, and lately it seems like they're cookie cutter pen tests where every organization I see the same exact problems, and you know, no one actually fixes some of the same things. And so this talk is about kind of getting rid of those easy shells of the engagement and making me work for domain admin. And actually increasing your security posture. So I end up taking over the same ways though, and hopefully the things I'll present to you today is how to fix them, how to find them, and from the red team perspective, if you guys don't do this now, definitely do it. But internal threat and vulnerability management programs consistently miss the basics. And I'm not going to call out any scanners, because they do an excellent job. I use some of them. But they often miss things because you look at it in a siloed approach, or you do discovery once and you don't port scan your network. Anybody that's on a blue team that doesn't use Nmap, you got to learn what's on your network. And all the time I talk to blue teams for very large organizations where I ask them about Nmap and they say, no, we run ping sweeps on our vulnerability scanner to find things, but no Nmap. And it's like, come on, guys. And then the last point, organizations really make attackers' lives hard. So rarely is privilege escalation and lateral movement for me very difficult. Once I get one password, I can reuse that across the network, and that shouldn't be the case. And then why I continued. So we covered some of this, but we also keep focusing on this idea of like next-gen product, which fixes this, and that's covered in every single talk, I think. But I'm not going to knock those products because they probably do a great job. I've seen some great things out there that detect certain threat scenarios, but if you spend all your effort on that, you're going to miss the basics of, I'm still going to find a blank SA. Just a couple of weeks ago, I found a really great organization, really large, really great blue team, had some really cool two-factor stuff going on, really great service management, but there was blank SAs, so it's game over. So effort, spend, money. We have this problem. So we bought Blinky Box, we have security, but then you forgot about your old systems out there. So you have your FireEye or insert monitoring tool here that I shouldn't call out, but then you have shared local admin accounts, so once one is compromised, your network's over. And then the next part is, the reality of this world is you're going to get popped, you're going to get breached. I think everyone here understands that. My source is every data breach report ever. We do a lot of IR, and it's really interesting to see kind of the state of security out there. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to react once you're breached? But how are you going to limit the attacker's capabilities? And so the whole idea is learn from Home Alone. So did he just wait to get breached and call the cops? No, he put layered defenses so that he could detect them and slow them down, and he didn't get kidnapped or whatever the end was. So definitely detect the threat. I'm not going to cover that in this talk. There's a lot of great ways to do that and a lot of great talks. That picture didn't turn out well. But I will cover that idea of make privilege escalation hard. So privilege escalation and lateral movement, layered network defense, that should be the goal. That should be what you concentrate on. And this is just a creepy Home Alone picture that I found that I wanted to share with you guys. So gold jacket, green jacket, who gives a shit? But this whole idea of defining blue, red, purple, I don't really care at the end of the day, but there's no reason that a defensive team can't use the same tactics I use to find the problems. And that's really, hopefully, what you guys will take. The other idea is this asset protection. It's become a really big theme right now, where, well, we worked on our firewalls and we realized we can't keep people out, so we're going to protect our assets. And there's definitely a lot of value in that. And I won't say there's not, but there's a lot of value too in kind of getting that red team or attacker mindset and thinking about a problem like that. There's some excellent talks on threat modeling and how useful those are. But if you spend all your time and effort protecting your assets, so maybe you have critical database here, critical SAP system here, you can't guess how I'm going to compromise your network every time. So we go back to that Blinky Box scenario. You protected your assets, but then I found this weird report that your HR person was generating and saving in this spot, and I found it, and then you say, oh, well, you got really lucky, our database was protected. Yeah, I didn't attack your database, though. Or maybe I attacked your password. And that happens every single assessment. And so the challenge is implement something from this presentation. The winner gets pissed off pen testers and significantly increased internal security posture. So the local admin risk. Again, nothing new here. So the whole idea is one ring to rule them all, right? So I get one password hash. I can just pass that hash or reuse the clear text if I can crack it or if I get group policy preferences or something like that. This has been around since 1997, thanks Wikipedia. But it's still not fixed. And I'm not going to go over the whole fixing past the hash. What I will say, because that's unfixable at this point, right? You can say we'll go full Kerberos, so it's not going to work in any enterprise. So let's concentrate on what we can fix, the local administrator account. How many of you guys have disabled your local admin account? Probably not many, right? It's hard. So we're consistently told do randomized passwords on computers. And we're also consistently told do password zones. The reality is these don't work, and they're minimally effective. Randomized passwords can work. They come with a big price tag and a big both capital cost and resource cost. So you can buy that product that does random passwords on every product, but they don't scale well with organizations, especially large ones, big IT presence. The other one is password zones. So now I'm going to take this local admin account, and I'm going to put a zone for HR, right? A zone for IT, a zone for marketing. But as a bad guy, once I compromise one account in HR, I'm going to bounce around all of those 20 machines until I get one that's reused on another area. And it's just going to make my life slightly more painful, but it's not really going to fix it. So just go ahead and disable remote access. If you guys take one thing out of this talk, disable remote access for the local admin account. I mean, really, it's simple. It takes 5 minutes, and there's not very many good arguments why you shouldn't. So, I mean, that quick group policy setting just incredibly increased your security posture. It makes me, once I compromise that account, not be able to effectively reuse it. Any of you guys did this on your network? Try it out. I've ran into networks that do this, and it just becomes such a pain to do post-exploitation. So the other thing is, recently Microsoft made an effort at addressing this whole idea of pass the hash and LSAS injection, where you're extracting passwords from memory and group policy preference. So that's awesome. They made an effort and they backported this idea of the local admins and members of this group from Windows 8 to Windows 7. So now you can add that to disable remote access. It might not work on servers, but try it out. It's really cool. They just came out with that a week ago. I'd encourage you to read the Microsoft article about it. So hopefully 5 minutes later, you've significantly increased your posture. Next one is the disable it, what I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to say this is going to work for everything. It's certainly not going to work for servers and laptops. If they fall off the domain, you need to fix them, right? But they can work for desktops. Windows 7 doesn't fall off the domain very often, and if it does, you probably need to reimage it. And don't dismiss this. Challenge why you can't do it. I've seen a lot of large places do this, and I'm sure your organization could too with proper testing. Is this making sense? The next part is local administrator rights review. I've almost never heard of an organization do a proactive review of local admin accounts. And it's really one of the most useful things you can do. I, all the time, come across domain users, so the group of everybody in a Windows network, be a member of local admin on a machine or two. And then, you know, I'm in, right? So audit these, you know, go out and review, create an Excel sheet of all your computers and who's local admin. It doesn't make sense if there's more than 3 or 4, right? There shouldn't be. Maybe some service accounts, but those should be groups. This is a huge thing, especially as we start to protect better. We can't protect past the hash. And so if I can pass the hash this machine and be local admin, that's going to be a pivot point. If I'm not admin, I can't pivot off it. So some tools you can do to do this. Windows has several different WMI and PowerShell-based scripts to basically query who's local admin. There's also some old school tools like NBT Noom, local, and just audit this. Look at who's admin and why they need to be. Create, make IT justify why this account needs to be an admin. Now there are legacy apps out there, but with Windows 7, there's pretty granular access control rights. You can challenge yourself to fix it. So NetBIOS LLMNR. You guys familiar with this? Nothing necessarily new at this point. It's been around for several years now. But the idea of the name spoofing attack. So I go to CircleCityCon.com, except I spell it with a K because I fat-fingered it, right? It's not in the host file. DNS won't find it. So Windows will say, hey, go to your local subnet. Look at LLMNR NetBIOS. And ask all your friendly computers, hey, do you know CircleCityCon? Now, as a bad guy, say, yep, that's me. While you're at it, connecting to me, send your integrated Windows authentication. Now I just intercepted your password hash that I can potentially crack, or pass it along in a limited factor to a machine where you have admin rights. There's a couple great talks on that, like domain admin in 60 seconds or less, which is a hilarious title for a talk. But that was a great example of how to reuse that hash and basically become an admin. But essentially, that's the risk, right? And the fix is pretty simple. Just disable LLMNR and NetBIOS, name service. They're very easy scripts and GPO settings, but I never see organizations do this. Lots of times they say that there's a legacy app, right? There's always a legacy app. Challenge the person that says that to say, what legacy app? How do we fix this? I understand your problem. Let's identify it and fix it, right? And then also, don't rely on DHCP necessarily for pushing these settings, because I can manipulate DHCP, and that doesn't really work well for devices that might not adhere to that. Mitigations, if you can't disable it, at least have a strong password policy. I'll cover that a little bit more later, but everyone says so. But a strong password policy prevents me from cracking this. And this is probably my favorite attack these days. This is how I get authenticated on your network every time. And then have smart local admin rights, which I already covered, and then local firewalls and user right restrictions can help mitigate this too. Password policy, I'm not going to cover this too much, but you guys all know strong passwords, right? They're hard to sell, but I will say I've seen organizations with relatively immature security postures with strong password policy, and that single thing alone can make my life really difficult. I can't guess a password well. I can't crack an intercepted net NTLM hash, and it really makes me challenged to go from anonymous to authenticated on your network, especially a passphrase. So it's the cheapest thing you can do. So vulnerability management. Thought that this was a GIF, but whatever. So there's no reason as a blue team member you can't scan for these things on your network so that they're not there. Patching, for instance. I hear all the time, hey, make sure you look at patching because we're a few weeks behind. And it's like, I as a bad guy, I don't care if you're a few weeks behind on patching. I'm not exploiting the latest Microsoft CVE. I'm exploiting the old stuff. There hasn't been a reliable remote code execution vulnerability in Windows in many years. And the reality is red teams, pen testers, they look for the MS-SQL, and they don't care about your 2008 boxes that are 2 weeks behind. Now, I'm not saying don't patch. Don't take that away, please. Definitely patch, but I'm targeting your legacy boxes. So oftentimes, vulnerability scanners, believe it or not, miss this too because of the insufficient way that they gather your hosts. So ping sweeps don't necessarily work appropriately, but this is a great mechanism to find those old boxes on your box. This is an AESI query using POSSECMod, which is a really cool PowerShell tool for auditing security settings. Doing this will spit back all your XP boxes that are old, all your 2000 boxes. This is also a great red team trick for those attack and pen people as a way to find the boxes that are vulnerable without doing any scanning. So I put it on a gist, but essentially you just query ADSI for all your computer accounts and look for the old ones. It's pretty simple. Scanning for MS-SQL 6.7. This one, do it at your own risk. Use your vulnerability scanner, though, if you have one. These mechanisms, I don't know. They can crash boxes. But Metasploit and Nmap, they're not scary. They're really easy to use. So XP legacy mitigation. for those that can't patch, I hate the end of the world people that say, oh, well, you know, XP exists, so I might as well stop bothering defending my network and I can't get rid of it. You can mitigate the risk. If you have patching, local firewalls, limited browsing, it's not the worst case scenario in an attack perspective. All right, so next, I mean, you guys all know the risk of MS-SQL blank passwords, right? If they've been around forever and I still find them, probably 50% of the time, believe it or not. There's a 2000 box somewhere. So the main risks that we have is these really crappy database passwords. I call it MS-SQL here. There's also every other data, Oracle, you know, Postgres. They all suck at this. They all have bad passwords, blanker Joes. There's also in MS-SQL the public role that I commonly see domain users in. Well, if the domain user's in there, I can connect in and issue limited commands so I can dir tree my box and get the service account hash. So audit these proactively. So to check for them, it's really simple. Do an nmap 1433 because your blank SAs aren't going to be on the newer ports. Also check out Nullbind released a script. I think it's going to be pushed to POSHSEC soon, but it'll query ADSI for your database servers and attempt to do that public role thing. But one of the key things I want to bring up here is this and the other things I'm going to show you need to be done on a quarterly basis because they pop up all the time. Your devs are spitting up boxes and they're going to have this stuff on there. MS-SQL comes with so many products, like a limited version like SQLite, and it's never properly secured. You need to proactively audit this on a quarterly basis or more. The next one, probably the easiest shell I have on an assessment, and I can count on literally one hand how many times I've not seen a Tomcat out there. Tomcat, for those that don't know, it's a web server run by Apache Software Foundation. It's basically a web application server that can host jar and WAR files, JSPs. And it's configurable largely by web consoles and XML files. Typically runs on ports 80, 8080, 8443. And the management interface is exposed by default with the default password. So generally speaking, it's Tomcat, admin. There's one of several possibilities. So the risk is I, as a bad guy, log in, I upload my own WAR file, now I am system on your box. And this is like the easiest shell I get, and I get it consistently. And there's no reason we can't proactively audit these and kind of fix them ourselves before the bad guy finds them. JBoss, same thing. You know, pretty much it's just similar type Apache type web application. Ships with default credentials often, and admin being. And then it also has really bad authentication mechanisms. So it commonly exposes JMX console and web console without requiring authentication or other potential dangerous servlets. So basically, these are incredibly easy to exploit, and they pop up all the time. Vendors ship with Tomcat and JBoss installed in tons of servers. I just came across a very large security product that was in place in an organization that had JBoss on it with default credentials, and it was installed by the vendor. These things are everywhere, and they really are easy to pop. So changing those passwords is really important. So service identification, it's incredibly easy. Port scan for these. And then, so password testing. I wrote a quick PowerShell script this past week. Usually I use Metasploit for this, but basically, this PowerShell script will just take your IPs and ports and run it against the default Tomcat and JBoss passwords. It's really easy to do, and I highly encourage you to do this on a very frequent basis. I've been to organizations that we found Tomcat a couple years ago, maybe, and then we find the same server, same thing that the organization says, no, we fixed that. Well, then there was a patch update and the password got reverted. Or vendor came in to fix it and now it's back to normal and back to admin. So it really is something we need to check on a quarterly basis or more. Testing, so I already showed you this method. There's also Metasploit has a great one for JBoss and Vuln Scanner. And also there's a tool called Clustered, which I use all the time on red teams, or pen tests, to find those bad JBoss authentication servlet errors. So the fix, it's easy to do in the XML files. There's a bunch of help articles on how to do it. But please, please, please scan for these. Don't let me find them. ARP spoofing. So you guys know what ARP spoofing is? I was just actually in another talk I was listening to, a really great talk on ICS controls. The speaker wrote a new ARP spoof technique on industrial controls, really cool. So if you didn't see the talk, check it out online. But there's a lot of people that say ARP spoofing is a BS attack method. And I would challenge you that a very large retailer says differently. After, in 2006, they lost a lot of money from ARP spoofing. But for anybody that doesn't know, ARP spoofing involves manipulation of ARP packets for me to basically inject myself in the middle of a communication. ARP by design doesn't have authentication in the protocol. But I'm not going to cover that to death because there's a million talks on it. But the fix is dynamic ARP inspection and DHCP snooping. Now there's the caveats of you have to have newish networking gear for this and support it here. But it can fix it. It's a lot of work, but I've seen plenty of places do it, and please do this. You also definitely should be patient with your network team when they roll this out, because it can be a year or more process, and buy them beer or something, because this is a lot of work. So the challenges of this, though, make sure you audit those, what's it called, trusted ports, and check your threshold levels. So printers, for instance, and phones commonly have to become a trusted port because they spew out ARP traffic, right, for no reason other than that the driver sucks. So they have to become a trusted port, but then things move around and now a computer is in there, or now a bad guy's in there, and it can be used for ARP spoofing, despite all the effort. And then if you can't do it, there's a lot of blinky box solutions to fix ARP spoofing that rarely work, and they're incredibly expensive because you need one on every subnet, because ARP is layer 2, right? There's also some really cool methods with a couple HIPS tools out there, Symantec being the one I can think of off the top of my head, that has ARP spoof detection built in, which is really cool, really great mechanism. And if you guys have that in your organization, enable that feature because it's really awesome. Then there's also some open source detection mechanisms. You can research those, but I would really recommend fixing it, not detecting it, because it's just another log to monitor. So those are the basics of my easy shells. Now there's several others that I could put in there, but those are the ones I probably find most frequently, and the things that your organization has to do. The rest is things that it should do when it has time to make my life as a bad guy hard. The first one is Firewall Egress. So Firewall Egress, what ports and services do you allow out of your network? So don't make data exfiltration and command and control efforts by attackers too easy. At least limit and restrict your access out. If you can't block everything, block the high-risk ports, right? Block SMB out. SMB, Windows, if you allow that out, I can insert a UNC path into a web server and basically intercept your credentials from the internet, which is pretty scary. Comcast figured this out, so can you. Also consider GeoIEP blocking. Won't work for everybody, but it's a cool mechanism to limit your attack surface. So local firewalls. Local firewalls can correctly fix 80% of your network problems, internal network security problems. Where did I come up with 80%? I made that up, but it's a really great technique to limit your privilege escalation and lateral movement. So prove your hosts need to talk to hosts. You know, it's really hard to manage, you can say, but it becomes really easy when you look at group policy and look at host-based firewalls. So this can help mitigate a lot of problems, including local past the hash, name spoofing, end user stupidity, so people that do silly things like bring your own cloud or bring your own SQL server. So the basic concept is on a user subnet, you need probably the Windows ports to talk in from IT and servers, but you don't need other user subnets to talk to other user subnets over Windows ports. So that basically prevents me from being in that left subnet and passing the hash or remotely connecting in to one of those ones on the right. And it's really easy to do, and it's one of the best things you can do to prevent my lateral movement. Next is server and local firewalls. So again, I said this is something you do if you have time, but at an end user level, if I can't guess that SQL password, I can't pop that shell. So maybe you do have that crappy Tomcat password somewhere, but if I can't connect to it easy, I can't pop it. Now, these come with a caveat. I regularly will bounce around and proxy hosts if you segment something off. So there are ways around it, but this can be a great mechanism to prevent me from getting stupid easy shells. And also, if I can't enumerate it via DNS or Nmap, I might not even know it exists to attack it. So host-based protection. I'm going to try not to call out any vendors here, but I already mentioned my favorite before, Symantec. But if they have the capabilities, use them. There's the product I'm thinking of has ARP detection, network scan detection and blocking. It also detects static challenge responses. So that NDNS LLMNR spoofing I talked about, if your HIPS protection can detect this, every tool out there will, Kane, Metasploit, Responder, they all use a static challenge to begin with of 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2. There's a lot of rainbow tables, that's why they use that. Well, HIPS can say, hey, this is a known bad challenge response, and the likelihood of occurring is almost nil. So let's flag it and alert the responders. The other thing is make sure you're responding to alerts that HIPS is presenting. You know, I don't drop a lot of payloads anymore on machines. I inject into memory. But if I were to trigger antivirus, have some sort of instant response and keep that in your playlist. Don't cast out AV as we like to do and say it's worthless, because if it does detect, it's really awesome. They also can detect PSExec, which is a really cool mechanism. PSExec, for those that don't know, it's a sysinternal suite tool. There's a few derivations of it that allows remote management. And for me, it allows, that's my favorite go-to tool if I'm not using WMI, to remotely connect into hosts. So it's often used by IT, but it's all the time, we see it all the time in IR engagements used by threat actors and pretty sophisticated APT-style attacks. I know I'm using buzzwords, but buzzwords speak to people. So detect on PSExec if you can. The next one, this one's been popping up a lot lately. I actually just saw it in an organization which was really cool deployed. EMET, this is the closest thing you're going to get to a APT detection tool or prevention. So it blocks a lot of 0 days by default. Last bunch of IE 0 days that came out, EMET blocked it by default. And I know there's a lot of cynical people out there that say, oh yeah, but there's this bypass mechanism out there, but the fact of the matter is almost every single 0 day for Internet Explorer or Java, it blocked by default. And excuse me, I as a bad guy might just move on. I might not play with that exploit and change the buffer to try to bypass it. EMET's incredibly hard to bypass too. Next one, defensive sexiness. Any Game of Thrones fans? You don't fight with honor? No, but he did, right? So I don't fight with honor when I pen test. That's why I guess that password or I think of something you don't think of and didn't include in your threat model to get your goods, right? So nothing I do as a bad guy is sexy. And this isn't knocking that whole defensive sexy movement. I thought that was cool. It's just saying blue teams don't have to be sexy. If you have some really stupid method to detect bad guys, do it. One of my favorite parts about my job is on a red team assessment, after it's all done, sitting down with the blue team and say, okay, here's everything I did. What did you all do? Let's figure out the disconnects and let's figure out what worked. So it doesn't really matter how you catch a bad guy in the end of the day. It matters if you caught them. So look at silly things like MAC addresses. Look at like a VMware MAC address popping up on an end user subnet. Probably doesn't belong there. Same with like canonical requests, connects out to Ubuntu. Probably doesn't belong in a Windows Enterprise network, right? Non-proxied internet connections, Windows updating settings. So Windows by default, you know how it knows that you're connected to the internet? It does that by resolving a Microsoft DNS entry and connecting to a Microsoft text file. You can look it up, but there's a Microsoft TechNet article. But if you want to query in that and then block that on your host, that's a great way to potentially detect when a bad guy inserts a computer into your local subnet. Same with scanning for admin money access. I do this all the time because it helps me prevent an interactive logon. So I connect into admin money before I connect to your device. So I, as a bad guy, love admin money, right? There's no legitimate reason that I should be connecting out to 5 or more admin shares on the network. So that's a great detection mechanism. I've seen several SIEM products start to alert on this. Also, dummy accounts and things like that. I've gotten basically caught from some of this type of stuff, and it's really valuable. So this whole like idea of an active defense or really can be cool way to detect bad guys. So threat and vulnerability management. So a lot of this was like technical things to implement, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Because there's a lot of great talks on how to sell security to your organization, but make your vulnerabilities into a predefined plan. I hear all the time, yeah, we know that existed, but we just haven't fixed it yet because we don't have the capital or we don't have the buy-in. Make it into a defined remediation project and get commitments and hold accountability. So make this into a project and present it to leadership, because projects management understands and they can see, oh, we're 2 weeks behind on this. They might not know what it is. They say, why are we behind? And they get, they hold accountable people's actions. So it's a great way if you're kind of crying wolf and helpless in your organization to actually get buy-in from management. And then for the stuff you can't fix, document the hell out of it, so at least you're not on the line if things go wrong. So I talked kind of fast, but takeaways. Basically, doing things in this slide or in this deck will make privilege escalation and lateral movement hard. Don't defend a tool, defend the behavior. So my behavior of remotely connecting into hosts, so WMI, IPS exec, that type of stuff. If you can prevent me from doing that, you can prevent me from taking over your network easily anyway. And then services pop up like flies, and change management rarely works, or at least security change management. It's really hard to know things when you're in a big organization and have a lot of developers. So frequently look for these type of vulnerabilities. Frequently scan yourself. And then also, don't be afraid to use the same tactics bad guys use to find these problems. Like, there's no reason we can't scan for Tomcat. We can't look for those SQL server problems, those Joe passwords. We can do the same thing they can and kind of get out of that role of, no, I do IDS implementations, or I do say, okay, well, we're going to detect it, but let's look at privilege escalation too. Let's make it a layered defense. And then last thing, seriously disable local admin remote access. Otherwise, I'm going to do that to your network. And then also, thanks for CircleCityCon and some really great people I've had the opportunity to work with. And any questions or comments? Yep. So this actually surprised me, but I've worked with some pretty big companies, and a couple weeks ago, I was at, the organization size was, I can't tell you exactly, they had 190,000 users. And they had EMET deployed on their servers, so not user subnets, but it was a start. And you can push it out through group policy, so it is doable. And I'd rather push it out and like disable the crap out of it, but have it enabled for a few things than not have it. You can set up whitelist, blacklist of which processes it looks at. So it is doable, though. It's 100% doable. Other questions?